We're going to go over to Southern Miss. Okay. We're going to talk about Charles Huff here. All right. And look, okay, if you look at the data, we're going to call it 5 seasons. All right. In terms of Southern Miss's performance as a team in the Sun Belt / the USA, right? It has been suboptimal. All right. Will Hall did not work out. Okay. It You have a situation here where like you actually legitimately have resources at this school, all right, and you can see it in baseball as well, very successful baseball. Southern Miss also used to be really good at football, like a legitimately like good football team. Back in the day, they can win 7, 8, 9 games a year. They can do that. The question is Charles Huff going to be the guy that can get them there? Right, the former Marshall coach, he showed that he could get it done at Marshall. What I will say about Charles Huff, though, it's like Marshall, obviously like before, the 90s, early 2000s, like it wasn't a thing to win at Marshall. That's not what people did. Marshall didn't win games, all right. But Doc Holliday did a pretty damn good job with that program. And then Charles Huff comes in and also proves that you can win games there. And he had a couple big signature wins, including the one against Notre Dame. Of course, we all remember that one a couple years ago. He's had good teams, all right. So is Doc Holliday. So I do think like when people look at this in the last 5 years, right, your generic general college football fan might be like, okay, the expectations aren't high. But I think the disparity between the expectations of the national media and the fan base of Southern Miss, right, vastly differs. And I'm kind of with the fans here. Like, there should be relatively high expectations for this team. Given the conference that you're in, given the resources that you have, given your geography, by the way, Mississippi, very good state. Lots of talent there.
And the
That
border
whole
states too are very talented as well.
Correct. So you can do well. Some good coaches have come out of Southern Miss. Todd Monken. I'm just saying they can get it done. So I think this is a very good hire. And we'll talk about grades in a little bit, but I'll let you talk a little bit more about Charles Huff, his staff. Whatever. I know you've got. Just billions of stuff to talk about with this guy.
Yeah, so obviously, well, first of all, who is Charles Huff, right? So if you are, a Big Ten or SEC fan, you might recall that name not only because he's the guy that beat Marcus Freeman Notre Dame a couple years ago, but also what he did at the running back position. He's been a running back coach, right, for a long, long time, going back all the way to 2012, getting into running backs in the NFL with the Buffalo Bills. He moved back into college, was at Western Michigan for a year, then went to Penn State, recruiting notable names such as Saquon Barkley, right? Obviously, everyone knows about him, what he's doing in the NFL right now. Went to Mississippi State, had success there. At Alabama, recruited guys like Najee Harris. And then once he got to Marshall to be the head football coach there, you've seen guys, I feel like churning out guys year after year. You look at, Rasheen Ali, you look at AJ Turner this past year and others. They've done a very good job there. What he does very, very well. And also winning games. You mentioned, Marshall I don't know, 2012 was not really, winning a lot of games, consistently going to bowl games. And ever since you said Doc Holliday started having that program move in the right direction, getting ranked in the AP poll, and now Charles Huff, after going, 7-6 with his first year, making a bowl game, 9-4 second year, making a bowl game, 6-7 last year, making a bowl game, and then the first 10-win season in almost a decade for Marshall. Winning the Sun Belt, obviously, fantastic. So first of all, you're getting a guy at Southern Miss in Charles Huff who just won the league you are in. And if he tells you exactly how, why you're like, well, Southern Miss doesn't have the resources. Why is Southern Miss getting a guy like this? Well, he had options too. I'm sure he did. Charles Huff went from the best team and winning that title in that conference to then take over the worst team who went 1-11, right? And defeated in conference play. It shows you, like you said, the potential that this program could have in the Sun Belt. Yeah, and obviously his contract, I'll get into that here.
Also, so like your AD, Jeremy McClain, was the AD previously at Troy. Like Southern, that should tell you what this program is capable of, that you have the AD of Troy coming to Southern Miss. You have the coach at Marshall, just won the conference, coming to Southern Miss. We're not crazy for thinking that there could be high expectations for Southern Miss in the future.
And also, you talk about investment into your football program and your coach, the contract here. So Mississippi, the state of Mississippi is interesting because it does not allow for longer than 4-year contracts. So it's a 4-year contract worth $950,000 with an automatic 1-year extension, this time coming December 7th on 2025. So he'll basically, with all due respect, it's a 5-year deal about there. His salary, right? $950,000 doesn't seem like a ton. You know, if you're seeing a guy like Chip Kelly going to make $6 million in the NFL at offense coordinator, that's tied for third in the Sun Belt, right? That would have been tied for third in the 2024 season. Will Hall made, almost over $100,000 less than that, right? A little over 800,000. Charles Huff was making $750,000 at Marshall, right? Which was, bottom 13, 14 there in the Sun Belt, which just shows what he can do. Obviously, it shows that just because you're getting paid more to do a job doesn't mean you're going to be better at it. But I think that's the reality of the investment that Southern Miss is willing to make in Charles Huff. Not only Huff, but also his assistant salary pool, something we talk about a lot here and how important that is to building out a staff, right? Assistant salary pool is going to be $2.35 million. And that's going to be kind of key. We're going to get into the staff here in a little bit. And I really like the staff. He was able to go out and get guys he was familiar with, guys who has had success, right, in past, obviously in the Sun Belt as well. All things that bode well for a good surrounding cast for Charles Huff in year one.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. And Brian Vincent, he's getting what paid, like $250 million, or sorry, $250,000, $300,000, like a fraction of what Charles Huff. Now Lou Monroe, we know it's a bit of a smaller program. That's a school where expectations are not very high, right? And we talked about Brian Vincent. I mean, we loved him as a coach getting hired, and he does great things the next year, even though we kind of pooped on Louisiana Monroe's roster. But I don't know. We'll see, like, what kind of roster turnover Charles Huff can have. Because if you remember, like, at Marshall, like, he he didn't inherit a bad team at Marshall, right? So it was he was able to kind of ease into it, right? Like literally the year but after Charles Huff took over, right? The year before Charles Huff took over, they were at one point ranked 15th in the AP poll during that season with Doc Hollidays. So to say that he was inheriting a bad team is very incorrect. So this is going to be definitely a bit of an adjustment because this roster, at least as it stands, at the end of the season, haven't looked too much into their roster. We'll be doing a lot of that, in the coming months, as transport gets whatever. There's a lot to build there, right? So this may not be a year one thing. And I know expectations are high for a lot of coaches in year one. But when we evaluate the grades for these coaches, right, when we'll talk about those later, like we're looking like, are they going to meet expectations long term, right? And I guess expectations should be 7, 8 wins a year, competing for your conference championship consistently, not necessarily winning it, not necessarily making it to the championship, but competing for it at least. So, I mean, I like it. And this staff, like you said, very interesting. I'll let you get into it.
Yeah, so starting with the offense here, a lot of cohesion here, which I love, especially in year one stuff. Like you said, if they're going to get the most out of these players, I want familiarity. I want guys that know what they need to be doing. And this first offseason, it goes like such a whirlwind that there's like not enough time to like get acclimated with each other and like gain chemistry sometimes. So if you have that already, that continuity is so valuable, right? So starting with the offense coordinator, it's going to be Blake Anderson, right? If you recognize that name, he was previously at Utah State, right? He got fired there for some misconduct, some other things that obviously we've talked about before. Obviously not good things. Hopefully lessons were learned there. Obviously terrible situation. I'm not here to cast judgment or anything like that, on Blake Anderson. I'm just here to tell you the facts here. The reality is, as a football coach, right, he has a lot of familiarity with the Sun Belt, right? So he was at Utah State. Before that, he was the head coach at Arkansas State. He also worked at Southern Miss under Larry Fedora, right, as an offense coordinator, QB coach from 2008 to 2011. All of his offenses have succeeded, right? Southern Miss, North Carolina, when he went with Larry Fedora, Arkansas State, Utah State, even all the way back to Louisiana Lafayette, another school in the Sun Belt. He's also done it in a multitude of ways, right? You've seen him have these elite high-flying passing offenses. You've seen him having success with ground and pound in the run game too, which to me is very versatile, especially if you don't know what you have on your roster and maybe you can't, work on both passing and throwing, like getting elite pieces at both of those for you. You can pick one and obviously lean into that. And he's shown to be able to do that at a high level at both sides, which is obviously fantastic. Speaking of continuity, with Blake Anderson, he's going to bring over the O-line coach, Sean Coughlin. He had been at Eastern Michigan the past couple seasons. He was with Blake Anderson back when he was at Arkansas State. When they were together in 2019, that Arkansas State offensive line had 4 all Sun Belt selections. Very, very impressive what they could do there. That obviously parlayed him, Coughlin, into the Eastern Michigan, and Blake Anderson over his way to Utah State. Now with continuity with Huff and Marshall, right? So you're seeing the wide receiver coach, Aaron Dobson, coming over from Marshall with Huff. He, as a player, was a second-round pick in the NFL draft as a wide receiver back in 2013. So one, maybe a younger kid, but also continuity with Huff, recruiting prowess, success, all that kind of stuff, things you like to see. The running back coach, obviously, I'm sure Charles Huff will have a hand in his running backs, but the reality is Telly Lockett's also a pretty darn good developer as well. He's been with Huff for 4 years now at Marshall. He was second-round pick, he worked with, like I said, Rasheen Ali, Kalen Laybourne, and most recently AJ Turner, right? And then lastly, on the offense side of the football, you've got tight ends coach Dalton Williams. He was with Huff and Lockett and Dobson, those guys, at Marshall back in 2022 as an offensive quality control guy. Past 2 seasons, he's been an offensive analyst at Texas under Steve Sarkisian. Now, the overlap there is Sarkisian and Huff had crossover for a couple years at Alabama when they were both under Saban, I think in the late 2010s, right, 2019, 2020, and that kind of stuff. So obviously this offensive staff, to me, it's a young staff at times, but you have continuity there. You've got people who have had success in the Sun Belt, right? Coughlin has had success at the offensive line. Wide receiver coach Dobson has had success in the Marshall in the Sun Belt. Lockett, success at Marshall in the Sun Belt. Dalton Williams with Marshall back, in 2022, and obviously Blake Anderson and all he has done in like 3 different stops in the Sun Belt, all having success there. I like it. I know it's a little bit young. I know it's maybe unorthodox, but the reality is I think it's a fantastic offensive staff, especially what he can do. And I talked about, being able to go out and get a guy like Anderson and keep some of your Marshall, younger, position coaches. Those are big deals. And that's why you have that assistant salary pool. That's $2.3 million, which is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, continuity, familiarity, right? And just overall, you got some good coaches on there. I'm especially excited about Blake Anderson from a coaching perspective, obviously. He is, like you said, I mean, he's had seasons where he's had a quarterback throw for 4,000 yards and then all of a sudden turns around and is like the next year, hey, let's have 2,000-yard rushers, Like, how many Utah State running backs went in the transfer portal a couple years ago or last year and had great success? And then how about Jordan Love, right? At the quarterback position. I mean, you have a resume, right? Jalen Royals at receiver. You have a resume of successful offenses, even some offensive linemen, right? For Blake Anderson and the coaching staff that he put together there. They got some guys, moving up into Power 5 football, several of them over the course of his tenure there. So that is one that I am especially excited about, Blake Anderson there being the offensive coordinator. I think that's a really good hire. And I think that hire at the offensive coordinator spot was going to be very important moving forward.
Yeah, and it sounds like, he did it as good as he could have. Obviously, time will tell if it works out. Moving over to the defensive side, defensive coordinator is going to be Jason Seymour. Again, continuity and familiarity. He was the defense coordinator at Marshall the past couple seasons, obviously developing a guy like Mike Green, who was just wowing NFL scouts at the Senior Bowl, and whatever he did put on tape. His defenses were top 25 in TFLs, sacks, third down percentage. Now, obviously, Mike Green had a lot to do with that, but you love to kind of see that aggressiveness and success in key spots, key statistics there. Defensive backs coach is going to be Dominic Bowman, right? Again, Marshall back in 2021 was coaching DBs there, previously at Arkansas and UNLV before this past season. The cornerbacks coach is going to be Tabez Calhoun. He was cornerback coach at West Georgia, right? So he's, he also played corner for Mississippi State, if that name sounds familiar to you. Played in the NFL. High school DB coach in Mississippi. Also GA for Mississippi State. Things you like to see there, right? With recruiting ties to the state, familiarity to the state, high school connections, all that kind of good stuff for the staff. D-line coach Brandon Deirdrick. right? You're looking at most recently at Ole Miss, then was at EMCC, right? The Last Chance Community College there, JUCO. Also worked for Tennessee, had a 7-year career at defensive end, played for Alabama back in 2005, won a title in 2009. Again, consistency, continuity within the state there, recruiting prowess, things you love to see. And then that special teams coordinator, Joe Bolden, right? He was at Tulsa, special teams coach there. He's also coached at Nevada, Ohio State, Michigan, FAU, Washington State, USC. He also played for Michigan. If you remember that name, Big Ten fans, he was a captain on that 2015 team. So obviously, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I know who Joe Bolden is and what he did as a special teams coordinator, right? But the reality is these are some nice names you brought in there. And obviously that's all they are right now, are names like we talked about. You have to go off and earn that, in the offseason and then obviously playing the games come the fall. But this is about as good as you could have done. I'll say I think Huff, first of all, succeeded everywhere he's been in his positions, not only as head coach, but position coach. He just won the conference that you just want to win eventually. I think the expectation is not crazy to say that Southern Miss can be competing for Sun Belt titles. Not that they will in 2025, but the fact is that they could be eventually, and more so should be, I think is the right term. And the coaching staff, I mean, on paper looks pretty good. The buying investment from the upper ups, right? They seem to be there. So honestly, if you are a Southern Miss fan, this season, the past couple seasons, really since, Monken left you and, Hobson had that thing going on, like it's been a poop show, right? To keep it lightly. This is about as good as you could have done. I think you're sitting here and maybe you were concerned about what you could have landed and attracted, in this coaching carousel, but you got lucky, I think, in a year where you didn't see a ton of Power 5 or Power 4 openings, and you put yourselves, I think, towards the top of these head coach opening spots and able to get a very qualified, very successful candidate in Charles Huff, right? I'll give it A minus, right? I think he's going to exceed expectations. I think he's a guy that you've seen him done it at Marshall. You've seen him do it at Alabama, Penn State, Mississippi State, all those kind of things. I think he will succeed here. And I think he will exceed expectations. I think he will do what he needs to do. And if he's here for 10 years, great. If he's only here for 4 years because he had great success, that's great too. I think that's a good problem to have. But as we stand right now, I'll give it an A minus.
So when you talk about expectations, are you talking about fan base expectations or are you talking about national media expectations?
My expectation, as I'm putting myself as a Southern Miss fan, right? And
so Southern Miss fan expectations.
Yeah, I think the reality is, if he wins a Sun Belt title, like this is exceeding expectations. I think to me, like
I don't know. I guess I don't know about that.
I think you have to. I mean, they have struggled in the Sun Belt, right? So they've been in here for 3 years, and they're 8-24 in conference, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, they were pretty consistent before that, making bowl games, right? But that to me is like pretty low bar, I think, to reach for this program, especially in the Sun Belt for them. I think like competing for championships, maybe that is a lofty goal, but the reality is like he could do it there, and this is a program that can absolutely do it. I wouldn't be surprised if he's competing for titles, Sun Belt titles, if that is. And if he wins one, obviously, boom.
In the, what is that, like basically 20 years that Southern Miss was in the CUSA, they won 5 conference championships in that time, right? So you look at Southern Miss and you're like, oh, they only have 5 conference championships in their entire history. It's because they were independent for like most of their program's history, right? Like, I think the expectation as a Southern Miss fan is to win 7, 8, 9 games and again compete and during his tenure, if he wins one, I think that's the expectation, if I'm being honest. I get that they've struggled in the Sun Belt, but I think when you hire a guy like Charles Huff, right, who just won the Sun Belt, right, the expectation is that he's going to win one for you at some point. I think this is a great hire. All right, I also think that defensively, I think he values that a lot, particularly as a running backs guy. And Southern Miss, if you look back the last decade, okay, every single winning season that they've had, they have had a top 80 defense. And when they don't, they do not win games. Go back. Every season in the last decade, they are a top 80 defense. They've had a winning record. If they are not a top 80 defense, they have a losing record by a lot. All right, so I'm with you. I think this is a great hire. Okay. I think my expectations for this program, I think might be a little bit higher than yours. I think if I'm a Southern Miss fan, I'm expecting success. I am. Okay. Like you can do this. You have the resources, you have the geography, you have everything you need to win. So, and I'm going to give this a B. Okay. And when we talk about our grading scale, CD9's grading scale goes like this. All right. B is you're meeting expectations. Okay. A is you're exceeding expectations. You know, C is you are not meeting expectations. And then I don't think we've ever given out a D, right? So I'm looking at this. Yeah, a B, by the way, is a great grade to give. If you're going to hire a coach and he meets expectations, like what? Like that's a great grade for me to give. Um, the caveat there is I'm worried about not necessarily worried about roster construction, but he did inherit a good situation over there. I think he is a good recruiter. Don't get me wrong. Um, it is a little bit you know different having to build up a program. I mean, all the programs he's been a part of have been either like insanely high functioning programs, right? Like 2018 Mississippi was, coming off a run like with Dak Prescott. So that program was, pretty hot at that point. Penn State, Alabama, high flying programs. Now he did work at Western Michigan, but that was 2013 Western Michigan, who, by the way, was awesome, right? Like he hasn't, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? 2011 Vanderbilt won 9 games. I'm pretty sure. Like he everywhere he's been, yes, he's won, but it's also been teams that have been, had very functional rosters and stuff that was already put together for him when he walked in the door. So this is not to bash him or anything. I think he's a good coach. I do think though, like if you didn't have the year that you had here at Marshall, like Charles Huff was not in a great light in fans' eyes in heading into the 2024 season. There were some games that they should not have lost in 2023. There were some bad coaching decisions, right? There was some underperformance at certain positions. You missed on your quarterback, right? So I don't know. I'm just not all in on Charles Huff. I think he will meet expectations. I'm just not ready to say, yeah, he's going to exceed expectations, meaning multiple conference championships, right? Several 10-win seasons, you know, even when conference realignment rolls around, like Southern Misses in talks, like that's exceeding expectations to me. Um, Now, the thing is, if he's there for 3 years and wins one conference championship in 3 years and then leaves to go somewhere else, I think that's also probably exceeding expectations too. I guess
Without a doubt.
timeline also matters in this as well. So, but I'll give it a B, and I like this hire.
It's
B
not
for
crazy
boy,
at
I
all.
like this hire.
Yeah, just picking back off your, top 80 defense statistic there. So Marshall was 79th in total defense and 42nd in scoring defense. So that'll play. That'll play for you without a doubt. If they can parlay that into this season, a lot riding on him and his staff.
Yeah, you also have I mean, in the Sun Belt, all right. I think you need to have a really good defense because of the level of athlete in the Sun Belt is heavily underestimated. You know what I'm saying? Like offensively, I think some of the offenses are pretty heavily underrated because they have some pretty elite athletes in the Sun Belt at receiver, at running back, at quarterback.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I think it's very underrated, particularly in that conference. I'd say you could get away with it in the American. I could say you could get away with it in the CUSA at times. I could say you could get away with it in the Mountain West, especially, but you cannot get away with having a bad defense in the Sun Belt.
No, not at all. And obviously Huff knows that. And that's why he went out and he got some of his guys he trusted at Marshall, bringing in some guys with Mississippi tie as well. And obviously, we'll see what kind of emphasis he puts on in player retention, also, roster or player acquisition with the portal and all that. See what he can do in the spring window as well.